where did your mom grow up?
So I'm a first generation United States American citizen. So my mom is actually from Trinidad.
Oh,
So part of her education background and her um, very passionate feelings are Trinidad was under the British rule throughout the British Empire. And thankfully, she was provided an excellent education that my grandfather insisted that she had for some of the same reason that she passed that on to me. So understanding what education did for her, and then in her coming to the United States and how it empowered her to be able to do what she wanted to do and to be able to get here and work and become successful were definitely some of the tenets that made her want to pass along some of those same things to me.
hmm. Well, that's great, man. Yeah, everybody that does have somebody special like that in their lives knows how important it is. So shout out to your mom for that.
Yeah,
And- yeah. So
yeah, and shouts out
how?
to all the Trinis out there too.
Yes, yes. How and so then how and why did you develop a love for DJing?
Man, I thought a lot of who I was hearing kind of sucked, and I wasn't hearing the type of music that I felt like I wanted to hear. So I, it was a very like conscious thought that made me feel like, all right, I could sit here, complain, and fold up my arms and screw face, or I could say, all right, well, look, if I think that there's something that could be better, all right, well, look, I guess let me stand up and sit and make it happen. So that's ultimately what began that process. And there was no like DJ schools or anything like that. So much like hip hop, has been, you just had to get into it. You had to be a part of it and figure it out. You had to you had to really help create it in real time. People still forget, man. Like hip hop is young. Hip
Yeah.
hop is like super young. Hip hop, even in 2025, we're talking it's just over 50 years old. So as an entire culture, something that was like really not even totally organized, but it was just this organic, you know, movement from a group of people who created something out of nothing. When you think about it, music had historically been people playing musical instruments, people singing and whatnot. And so now for the first time, you got a more, somewhat in ways mechanical form of music by taking certain parts of records to create new sounds. And then for the very first time, you didn't have to be a singer who can hit all these different notes and be a baritone or soprano or anything like this. If you had just an aesthetically pleasing voice and you had the ability to put words together in a way that painted a picture, you are now an artist.
Right.
And so that is something that is again it's so recent that it's because we're all so immersed in it and we've seen it for so long now, it feels like it's been here forever, but it really hasn't. Again, like when you think about classical music, that's been around for centuries. You think about jazz, that's been something that's been around for basically 100 years. Country music, has been around for so long. So again, getting into DJing, it was like, all right, so I got a turntable, I got a mixer. Now, how do I make this work? And for those who are either DJs today or have witnessed what DJing is like now, within the last 20 years, being that started to get based digitally, you now have all these visual cues and the digital devices like the computers doing work for you. It's telling you what a beat per minute is. It's showing you a wave file so you know where to bring something in. You know, back in the day, DJs, and shouts out to another one of our co-hosts, Terminator X, like you had to do it all through your headphone. You had to place a needle on a record to get to. And yeah, something that can get discussed at all. Like, for anybody who be house where somebody dancing keeps on bouncing into the table and knocking the needle around. That was real. Now that doesn't happen today because of the technology, but all these things were aspects of the game and the art that you had to deal with. It was just thinking back, it was something else. It's very, very different now than anybody who's recently, like I said, within the last 20 years have gotten in. But before that, totally, totally different thing. And not to mention about the fact that the matter is now we all have access to basically almost any song you want to hear within a millisecond, and you
Yeah.
have the ability to play it like in real time. Back then, you had to search for music. You had to go to a store to get it. You had to hope that they had a copy left for you. If you were a hip hop DJ specifically, and you always wanted two copies to do DJ tricks and back and forth and whatnot, you had to hope that they had two copies left. Because if you only had one, well, now you're just stuck playing the record and manipulating it in a different way than what you wanted to. So, again, today it's a totally different world.
Yeah, yeah. Like I also remember too when I was first learning about needle dropping or taping your vinyl so you could see where the
Mm-hmm.
drums hit and all that stuff is so different. Um,
Oh yeah.
it's a whole different world. So as you were, where were you when you were first getting your equipment and stuff?
So I've always been between New York and Florida. So at that time, I was actually in Florida and trying to figure it out. Record stores were somewhat sparse, and turntables. I mean, especially back then. I mean, you were looking at 500 a pop. And 500 is no little bit of an amount today, but you go back far enough, 500 for one felt like, well, I gotta sell a kidney.
Right.
And keep in mind, you needed two, and you also needed a mixer, then you also needed something to play the music through, which in the audio that you had at the house, it could be, something very low key because you just needed to hear it. But like there was no shortcut to a turntable. And sometimes you'd have like these I guess there was a shortcut, like these belt-driven turntables, but it was nothing like what ultimately became the Technique 1200 SL. And like that was the turntable you had to have. If you want to be serious and you want to be out in clubs and you wanted to be rocking parties, you had to be very familiar and know how to rock on a Technique turntable. Two of them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay. And with all this, you also have emerged and grown into a top-notch tennis commentator and such. So how, when, why, and where did you develop your love for tennis?
Man, it does sound kind of crazy. And at one point, it wasn't the thing to do, especially before Venus and Serena had hit the scene. It was definitely seen as like a white people sport, and not everybody understood it. But what attracted me to it was being raised as an only child. I do have a half brother, but being raised as an only child, you kind of see the world in a different way. Um, Obviously team sports, basketball, football, whatnot, where you are raised in a house with siblings, you're kind of a team, already by yourself, within your family. So for me, kind of watching this sport where it was like, one guy versus another guy, and it was almost kind of like boxing for me, another sport that I love, where it's just like these two dudes are going at it. The difference at the time between tennis and boxing was when a boxer goes to the corner, their ring man, their coach come in and they're giving them, feedback on what they're seeing and they're giving them, kind of like instructions on what to go do the next round. Tennis has changed now, but back then it was just like, it was you versus, and that was it. There was no coaching, there was no nothing. You bring your best, I bring my best, and that's it. And especially seeing a lot of the players of that era, going back into Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi, and watching the contrast of styles, it was almost like when you think about boxing again in contrasting styles, like Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier, clear contrasting styles. You think about Mike Tyson at his prime, and again, so many fights that he had, contrasting styles, and what made Mike so special. So tennis was very like that for me, and watching them and saying, man, this is it's something different, and historically, like I've always kind of gone a different way from where the masses were going. So if everybody was over here doing this, you pretty much gonna find me over here doing something different. Unless that
Gotcha.
something different was really dumb and stupid, I was kind of gonna be like more apt to go over here. So and tennis was definitely over here. Um, Tennis can also be a very, very expensive sport. So if you want to learn it the right way, I mean, you know, at a high level, as a junior player, I mean, you have people who are easily paying within the thousands per week for housing, for equipment, for coaching, for, you know, for all these things. So it's a real, real money sport. Um, I didn't have the capability and the blessing of having that ability to get in the sport like that. So, but what I did have again was that curious mind and the ability to be analytical. So, while I couldn't get mom to pay for the lessons, I could get her to pay for a recording device, which I use to write down everything that I was seeing on a tennis court. So much that it really gave me a huge insight. Wasn't exactly why I was doing it at the time, but um, that's what resulted. Having some conversations with some wonderful people at ESPN, and I guess them finding like, wow, I mean, this guy, like, listen, he's a DJ, you know, he hosts Rap City, but like he's talking like somebody who could be on TV for tennis. And I'm like, no doubt. So throughout a very long period of time of them trying to figure it out. Because again, on paper, I don't make sense. I don't make sense being on a tennis network talking about tennis or the TV network talking about tennis. But thankfully, the you know, a wonderful human being by the name of Jamie Reynolds saw it. He felt that there was something there, gave me that shot and opportunity, and had the ability to be in, you know, it's a lot of great firsts, and this may not go down in the annals of historic firsts in anybody's books, but it is in my personal book. As the first DJ to ever be a part of a United States national sports broadcast as a commentator and analyst. And that's what I was able to do. And I will never forget that opportunity, and I'm forever thankful to be held in that regard and in that light, to be able to be with the best in the business talking about a sport that I love. That I really hope that more people, and that was actually really one of my really true goals, was to bring more people to the sport. You know, especially people who felt that it was something that it's not necessarily. So basically, like for all my people in the hood, I want you to know that there's a place for you in the sport if you choose to be a part of it. And if seeing me or somebody like me made it feel is always a little bit more accessible, that was really my goal.